The scent of lemon polish and slow-cooked pot roast usually meant Sunday dinner at the Henderson house, but today, the air in Anna's kitchen was sharp with the tang of store-bought frosting and the metallic silence of a phone that hadn't rung. She watched her husband, Mark, scroll absently through his tablet, the blue glow highlighting the new lines of tension around his eyes. It was his 40th birthday, and his entire family, his parents, his sister, her 2 kids, were posting a relentless stream of content from Hawaii. A last-minute dream trip, they'd said, a deal too good to pass up. "You understand, Mark," his mother had said on the phone, her voice tinny with distance and excitement. "It's just not feasible for you all to come, with Walter's needs and all." The unspoken part, the expense, the hassle, hung there, a ghost at the feast. The group chat, usually dormant, had been a digital circus for days. Emojis of palm trees and cocktails, videos of shave ice, photos of sunsets. Mark had participated with stoic one-word replies. Nice. Wow. Fun. Then, this morning, the main video had arrived. Mark's sister, Lauren, had panned across a sun-drenched beach, her children building an elaborate sandcastle. "Happy birthday, Mark!" they all shouted, laughing and waving, their faces golden with sunblock and glee. Then, Lauren zoomed in on a vacant, brightly striped lounge chair, a single, untouched coconut drink with a tiny umbrella perched on its arm. "This one's for you." "Well, theoretically," she crowed. The camera shook with her laughter. "We're toasting you from paradise, big brother." The laughter wasn't joyful. It had a sharp, performative edge that felt like shrapnel. Mark had watched it on the kitchen stool, his back rigid. A tight, unfamiliar smile stretched his lips. "Looks fun," he'd muttered, the words like stones. He'd then retreated to the garage to organize some things, a place where the roar of the lawnmower and the smell of gasoline could drown out other things. Now, Anna swiped blue frosting onto a solitary cake, her movements harder than necessary. Their own children, Sam, 7, a whirlwind of kinetic energy, and Lily, 10, all solemn observation, were at the table crafting a monumentally lopsided cardboard birthday crown, glitter spilling across the oak like misplaced optimism. In the living room, Mark's father, Walter, sat in his wheelchair by the bay window, a worn wool blanket over his legs, watching the empty street. The stroke 2 years ago had stolen his fluent speech and the use of his right side, confining his world to this chair and the slow, patient orbit of his family. But his eyes, a faded denim blue, missed nothing. Anna saw them follow Mark's exit, noted the slight droop of Walter's left shoulder. The doorbell rang, a cheerful chime that made everyone start. Lily sprinted to answer it, returning with Anna's mother, Gran May, who carried a Tupperware container of her famous potato rolls, their yeasty warmth fogging the plastic lid. "Double batch," she announced, kissing Anna's cheek. Her presence was a soft, familiar weight in the unsettled air. She didn't mention Hawaii. Instead, she bustled over to Walter, her hand resting on his shoulder. "Walter, you're looking sharp. That plaid shirt brings out the sky in your eyes." Walter's left hand, gnarled and kind, came up and patted hers once, a silent language they'd developed. Dinner was a study in careful navigation. They ate the pot roast, the meat falling apart at the touch of a fork, the carrots sweet, the gravy rich. Conversation orbited the obvious void: school, the weird weather, a funny story about the neighbor's dog. Sam, oblivious to the undercurrents, talked a mile a minute about his school project on volcanoes, describing magma chambers with fiery enthusiasm. The word eruption hung in the air with an unfortunate irony. Mark smiled, nodding, but his eyes were distant, the video's mocking chorus playing on a loop behind them. Anna watched him push his food around his plate, his appetite stolen by a feast of pixels on a distant shore. After cake, which Mark ate with a gusto he clearly didn't feel, praising the kids' decorating skills, Grandmay herded Sam and Lily into the kitchen for extreme dishwashing, which involved copious suds and a negotiated bounty for any successfully cleaned dish. Anna began clearing the dining room, her heart a bruised peach in her chest. She saw Mark slump back in his chair, the facade crumbling. He wasn't looking at the leftover cake or the wilting balloons. He was staring at his father, at the still profile outlined against the darkening window, and in his gaze, Anna saw a terrifying thought. Is this my inheritance? Silence and absence? Then Walter made a sound, not a word, but a low, guttural effort from deep in his throat. Ah. He was pointing with his good hand, not at the tree, but insistently at the far corner of the room, where an antique steamer trunk, the color of old saddle leather, sat beneath a stack of board games. "What is it, Dad?" Mark asked, his voice wearier than it should have been. Walter pointed again, his finger jabbing the air. He then made a clumsy lifting motion with his left hand. "The trunk? You want something from the trunk?" Anna asked, setting down a stack of plates. Walter nodded, a slow, deliberate dip of his chin. His eyes were urgent. It was a relic, that trunk, a holdover from Walter and Eleanor's early marriage before she passed. It functioned as a kind of family archive, full of Henderson memorabilia that hadn't made it to the more formal albums. Old report cards with stern teacher notes, pressed corsages from long-ago dances, a bundle of love letters tied with ribbon, VHS tapes of camping trips where the picture had bled into static. Dust motes, stirred from their decades-long slumber, danced in the lamplight as Mark heaved the creaking lid open. The smell that emerged was complex: aged paper, cedar, and the faint, ghostly whisper of Eleanor's perfume. Walter gestured, his hand trembling with the effort of precision. Red." The word was thick but unmistakable. Mark dug. He pulled out a faded Red Sox cap from the '86 season, a crimson college sweater gone pilly with age. Walter shook his head, a furrow of frustration deepening on his brow. The wrong kind of red. Anna peered over his shoulder, her eyes scanning the layers of memory. Then she saw it, tucked in the very corner, its spine pressed against the trunk's side. A photo album, not a modern one, but the old-fashioned kind with sticky pages covered by plastic sheaths. Its cover was a deep Bordeaux red. "This?" she asked, lifting it out. It was heavier than it looked. Walter's whole body seemed to sag with relief. He nodded, then pointed to Mark and then at the table. "Bring it to him. Open it." They placed the album on the cleared table. With great, deliberate effort, Walter used his left hand to nudge it closer to his son. His intent was clear. "Look." The first page was a time capsule, a yellowed hospital announcement card. "It's a boy, Mark William Henderson, 8 pounds 3 ounces. Next to it, secured with brittle, yellowed tape, was a lock of fine, baby bird hair. Mark's finger hovered over it. "I never knew she kept this," he whispered. He turned the page. A toddler Mark, face smeared with chocolate birthday cake, beaming a two-toothed, utterly joyous grin at the camera. The next page, a 9-year-old Mark holding a sunfish aloft, his face a mask of pure triumph, his father's hand a steadying, proud weight on his shoulder. They were both grinning identical gap-toothed smiles. Page after page, a silent, beautiful narrative unfolded, not of grand vacations or landmark events, but of the quiet cathedrals of everyday life. Here was Mark at 6, building a sprawling leaf fort in the backyard, Walter on his knees beside him, handing him an oak branch. Here was Mark at 15, his face lathered in shaving cream, Walter's hand guiding his, both reflected in the bathroom mirror, one face lined with experience, the other with adolescent concentration. A photo of a 16-year-old Mark posing awkwardly with his first car, a rusted orange hatchback Walter had spent every weekend helping him restore. The pride in both their faces was palpable. Mark's breathing changed, grew deeper, slower. He wasn't flipping pages anymore, he was falling into them. "I forgot about this," he murmured, tracing a picture of them painting the backyard fence together, both splattered in brilliant white. "We argued the whole time. I wanted to use the roller, you said the brush gave a better finish. We got so mad we didn't speak for an hour." A soft, wet chuckle escaped him. The fence looked terrible. From across the table, Walter made a soft huff sound, a rough approximation of a laugh, his good eye crinkling. Anna's eyes met Grandmay's, who stood in the doorway, a damp dish towel forgotten in her hands, watching the scene with a soft, knowing smile. Mark turned to a final stiff page. There was no photo here. Instead, tucked into the sleeve was a single sheet of onion skin paper, its edges brittle as autumn leaves. The words were typed on an old manual typewriter, the letters slightly uneven. Mark pulled it out carefully, cleared his throat, and began to read, his voice rough but gaining strength. "For my son, on the occasion of becoming a man. It's not in the miles that you may roam, nor the crowd's loud, forgetful cheer, but the quiet strength you build your home on steady year. It's the calloused hand, the promised task, the small, true thing faithfully done. This is the question that I ask. What legacy is built by sun? Not just the bright, but the gray days too, the showing up, the seeing through. My pride's not in where you go, but in the man I watch you grow. Dad, October 98. Silence pooled in the room, deep and clean as a mountain spring. Mark's shoulders shook. He didn't try to hide the tears now. They tracked freely through the stubble on his cheeks. They were no longer tears of rejection or self-pity, but of a recognition so profound it shook him to his core. This was the answer. This was the rebuttal to the empty lounge chair. He looked up at his father, this man who had lost so much, who communicated in gestures and grunts, who had been written off by so many as a shadow of his former self. Walter's own eyes were wet, gleaming in the lamplight. He was looking at his son with a focus so intense it seemed to gather all the light in the room. Then he did something he hadn't done in 2 years. He focused his entire being, every shred of will left in his damaged body, on his right arm. A tremor, starting at his shoulder, traveled down his limb. With a shudder that spoke of monumental, Herculean effort, he lifted his right arm a few trembling inches off the wheelchair rest. He fought against the dead weight, the neural pathways firing through sheer love. He curled his fingers, slowly, agonizingly, into a loose fist, and then, with a final push, he extended his thumb. A thumbs up, the old, classic Walter Henderson thumbs up, the one he'd given Mark after his first solo drive, when he'd graduated boot camp, when he'd held his newborn son Sam for the first time. It was a standing ovation delivered from a seated position. It was a benediction. In that moment, the lavish beach, the mocking video, the untouched coconut drink, they dissolved into nothing. They were cheap glitter next to this solid gold. Here was the legacy, not in the postcard perfect trips, but in the photo album of the heart, filled with quiet hours and steadfast love and the smell of fresh paint and gasoline. Here was the man who had shown Mark what it meant to be a father, a husband, a man, not by taking him to Hawaii, but by staying, by teaching, by being present through every ordinary, beautiful, difficult day. Mark stood up. The movement was swift, sure. He walked over to his father, knelt by the wheelchair, and buried his face in the blanket over Walter's knees. His body shook with silent sobs of release. Walter's good hand came down, rested on his son's head, his fingers threading through the salt and pepper hair with a touch as gentle as it was firm. "Thanks, Dad," Mark choked out, his voice muffled by the wool. "Best birthday gift ever." From across the table, Sam, wide-eyed, whispered, "Did Grandpa just move his arm?" Lily, wiser, her arm around her little brother, whispered back, "Shh, honey, yes, he did." Later, after Grandmay had left with hugs that lingered and the kids were in bed dreaming of volcanoes and thumbs-up signs, Anna found Mark in the living room. The red album was closed on the coffee table, a sacred object now. Walter was asleep in his chair, his face relaxed in a faint, peaceful smile, the blanket rising and falling with his steady breath. Mark was standing by the window, looking out at the dark, familiar street. He felt Anna's presence and slid an arm around him, pulling her close. She rested her head on his shoulder. "You know what?" he said, his voice quiet and filled with a new-found solidity. "I'm glad they went to Hawaii." And he meant it, not with bitterness, but with a profound, peaceful clarity. For in seeking paradise, they had inadvertently left behind the only thing that ever truly mattered, the quiet, unmovable bedrock of home, built not of sand, but of shared memory, steadfast love, and the smell of fresh paint and gasoline. Here was the man who had shown Mark what it meant to be a father, a husband, a man, not by taking him to Hawaii, but by staying, by teaching, by being present through every ordinary, beautiful, difficult day. And that night, in a house filled with the lingering sense of pot roast and frosting and cedar, surrounded by the echoes of laughter and the profound silence of understanding, Mark Henderson turned 40 and found himself blessedly found.